So I'm going to let everyone have a chance in turn to introduce themselves. My name is Dr. Francesco Crocco. I am the Assistant Director for Instructional Support in the Office of Distance Learning at the University of Louisiana at Lafayette. So that's a mouthful. Basically, I manage a team of instructional designers and technologists who help faculty to design online courses. We do online teacher certification, online course reviews, professional development, and AI, landed in our lap. Gosh, it feels like it was just yesterday, but it was right. I think we started getting into it last January, February-ish. Um, and kind of just like the rest of the country, kind of rushed to get caught up and then did a whole bunch of AI professional development activities throughout the spring and then in through the summer. And the people here with me today helped to put on a lot of those AI activities throughout the University of Louisiana system during the summer. So I'm going to pass it on to the next person here. Oh, sorry. Let's go there. So maybe Megan, if you want to go next.
I'm Dr. Megan Lowe. I'm the Director of University Libraries at Northwestern State University in Louisiana, which is in Natchitoches, Louisiana. Go ahead and guess how Natchitoches is spelled. I will give gold stars if you can figure that out. I'm going to pass it on to Elizabeth.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Elizabeth Robertson Hornsby. I am an assistant professor and graduate coordinator in the Department of Communication and Media Studies at Southeastern Louisiana University, which is in Hammond, Louisiana, where I focus mainly on disruptive technologies and strategic communication.
My name is Meredith King. My pronouns are she, her. I am the Assistant Director for the Center of Teaching Innovation at the University of New Orleans. Hopefully that is self-explanatory as to where that actually is. I work in a position similar to what Frank does, focusing a little bit on pedagogical needs, a little bit of instructional design, a little bit of educational technology, sort of a catch-all for any of those sort of pieces that have to do with faculty and faculty development in that sort of teaching and learning zone. I also adjunct at another one of the universities in the University of Louisiana system. So I am all over the University of Louisiana system and have been lucky enough to get to work with this team since last spring, like Frank said, developing these ideas, being in conversation with them, and really starting to think about the way that this wave of AI is going to impact every part of higher education.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to introduce our invisible member here, which is generative AI. And we'll just state up front that some of the content for this presentation was actually co-created with AI. And that's a theme that we'll come back to later in our other sections. And just to show you how fast the AI is changing, this is already obsolete here. It should say Google Gemini, right? Which actually I'm actually starting to prefer over ChatGPT, which was my favorite. Okay, so let's move on. So we're going to get some audience engagement starting out here. I would like you to please scan that QR code with your phone and tell us, how do you feel about AI? How do you feel about AI? This is a word cloud. You'll be able to enter, I think, up to 3 words. You can either scan the QR or join on the web at polyv.com/FC990. We'll give you a minute to load that. How do you feel about AI? Terrified, excited, unsure.
Can I choose D, all of the above? Is that one of the options?
Yeah.
What is it that we found in New Orleans? Fearful love?
Oh,
Fearful love. We've done this a few times
fearful love,
and
yeah.
asked people and have been collecting our favorite answers. And fearful love was definitely one of the top ones that we had. Very much enjoyed that one.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and show the responses here. Here we go. Excited. Awesome. That's fantastic. It also may be the power of suggestion here. 'Cause I think I said that word.
Yeah, you
Next
said
time
that
I'm not
word
going to say
first.
anything.
I know.
But there's fearful, curious, optimistic, hopeful, intrigued. I like that one, intrigued. Yeah, I've been having conversations about AI with everyone I know and from all walks of life, and I think it's affecting everyone rather directly. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the next poll. Thank you for that. So the next poll, this will help gauge what is your proficiency with AI. So again, if you'll just scan that QR code there, or you're already in the app, you should be able to find this. Rate your proficiency: expert, intermediate, beginner, or never used it. And I see we already have 11 responses. This is good. By the way, this is Poll Everywhere that we're using. Really, really cool audience interaction tool. It's native with Google Slides, which is what we're presenting from. Okay, I'm just going to give it another few seconds. All right. All right, so let's show the results here. Wow, okay. Pretty even mix between intermediate and beginner. That's great. And we have some expert this time. Last time we didn't have anyone say that. So hopefully we don't say anything that's not true. And if we do, it's because it came from ChatGPT and it was hallucinating that day. And I'm glad to see that we have no one who has never used it. That's fantastic. Okay, so that gives us a little sense of who you are, and you'll have plenty of time to engage throughout this presentation. We will have opportunities for discussion. First, we're going to talk about what is AI, and I'll do a quick rundown on that. And then we'll get into our 4 sort of discussion topics. The first one being AI tools and productivity. The second one, academic integrity in AI. Then the ethical implications of AI. And finally, the future of learning. We're not going to end with some key takeaways. We're actually going to end with some Q&A at the very end. Okay. Let's move on. So what is AI? So this is actually the section where we consulted with AI to ask it about itself and do some deep AI reflection. So here is a definition of AI. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but just going to take your attention to the last sentence there. The goal of AI is to create machines and systems that can exhibit intelligent behavior and adapt to various situations without being explicitly programmed for each task, right? So basically you want a machine that can do things without being told to do those things and how to do those things, right? So it's capable of learning. Now, points to anyone who can guess the source of the image on the right there. Anyone? Feel free to unmute your mic.
Is that the Iron Giant?
No, close.
Dolly,
Nope. One more? I'm gonna have
Stable
some.
Diffusion.
No. And I like to have some pop culture references. So this is actually from the cover of a book called RUR, Rossum's Universal Robots, published I want to say 1920 by Karl Čapek, who's a Czech author. It's a play about robots, sentient robots that decide to rebel against their human overlords, right? Because they're being used as laborers. So this is considered the first instance of robots, but also I would say of AI in literature. Okay. And of course, in the first instance, you see there's already this fear that AI will turn against us, right? But in this case, it was actually, they're just actually kind of liberating themselves, right? But hopefully through this presentation, we come to assuage fears, of any kind of AI rebellion. And see how we can actually work in unison with AI to help each other. So key components of AI, machine learning, okay? The use of algorithms and statistical models to enable systems to learn. Deep learning, which is based on neural networks, right? Which are based on the architecture of the brain. Natural language processing, this is the big change that's happened in the last couple years with these large language models and the ability, for AI to interact in natural human language in a meaningful way. Computer vision and hearing, we're starting to see ChatGPT and some of these other chatbots incorporating more of the kind of multimedia elements, more senses. And then, of course, robotics, the integration of AI into a physical system that allows it to interact with the environment, right? Just saw something the other day about OpenAI working with some robotics companies to integrate their generative AI with the robotics so that it could work alongside humans in the workplace. That'll be interesting. So I'm going to go through some quick stages of AI, and this is actually something I asked ChatGPT to help me construct. So I said, if you had to break down the history of AI into stages, how would you do that? So here's stage one, symbolic AI. From the 1950s to the 1980s, you get what they call symbolic AI. It focused on creating intelligent systems using symbolic representation and logic-based rules. So basically, they were trying to encode human knowledge and reasoning into a computer program, right? Kind of teach it through code, through programming, what it should do. The next stage is from the 80s to the 90s. They call this connectionist AI, the creation of artificial neural networks inspired by the human brain's architecture. Emphasizes learning from example rather than from explicit rules, and you get to see some more improved pattern recognition. So by the third stage, machine learning, you no longer have an AI that can only learn from what it's told or what the rules are, but you have machines that can learn by doing, right? Learn through experience based on algorithms that allow the system to learn from data autonomously. So this has been around since the 1990s, actually. And that's one of the points I wanted to make is that even though generative AI comes on the scene in November, 2022, we have AI, significant forms of AI going back decades. Some applications, medical imaging, drug discovery, image recognition, autonomous vehicles. I mean, all this is happening already. Virtual assistants. This is before ChatGPT, right? And if anyone uses Grammarly, you got a little taste of what's to come when we got ChatGPT, which is sort of more advanced, of course, human-like interaction. Okay, so now we're at what they call narrow AI, stage 4. It's also called weak AI or generative AI, and you'll see what I mean why it's weak compared to the next stage. So it's designed to perform specific tasks with high proficiency. Some applications, text-based content creation, natural language chatbots, image generation and manipulation, music and audio and video generation, game development, coding. There's a lot that it can do, and some of these apps can do almost all these things. I have a bunch of logos here, so you can kind of test yourself to see if you recognize any of these. My new favorite one, by the way, is 11 Labs. It allows you to, it can basically create speed. It can speak any text that you input in a variety of human-like voices. Okay, whatever. But you can also train it on a sample of a real person's voice, so that it can read the speech or the text in their voice. And we've done this, we've tested it, and man, is it scary. Really does sound like the person you're training it to sound like. Okay, so I'm going to skip this because running low on time here. But I asked, well, how does generative AI work? And these are sort of the pieces of it. But as I understand it, I'm not a computer science person. It's a large language model tied to I was going to say that. See, now I'm blanking on it. So text-based interface, right? So you can ask it a prompt, and then it spits out an answer based on these models that it has. And the more data that it's trained on, the more refined the response, right? And then that opens up all kinds of privacy issues, confidentiality issues, whose data is it trained on? What about what you're putting into it, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, when it first came out, there were all kinds of concerns about it becoming sentient and telling people all kinds of strange things. I think OpenAI and these other companies, parent companies, have done a lot to put some limiters on the technology so that you don't get that kind of behavior, but there are still concerns around other issues, bias, hallucinations, et cetera, which will come up later in the presentation. So this is the holy grail, right? Stage 5, general AI. And some people say this is as close as 5 years away, right? So there, pictured there is Vision from the Marvel Universe, our latest sort of representation of AI. So this is what's called strong AI, or artificial general intelligence, AGI. Actually, I just saw the other day that Elon Musk is suing OpenAI, claiming that they have created AGI and that they are violating the mission of OpenAI. We're supposed to be an open source company, right? So really interesting. This is in the courts, someone claiming that AGI is already here. So what is AGI? It's the ability to understand, learn, and apply knowledge across various domains. So not just one specific domain, but various domains at a level similar to human intelligence. Essentially, it reproduces human intelligence, right? You marry that with robotics, and now you've got, kind of humanoid creatures running around in immortal bodies, right? This is so that's AGI. That's considered the future. And again, the prediction is anywhere from 5 to 50 years. All right, so I'm going to take us into a quick tour of a couple of AI tools, and then we're going to have some discussion. So how many people have used ChatGPT? And you can do a show of hands. You could do whatever. Okay, quite a few. Great. I see a lot of people raising hand. Okay. If you haven't used it, get in there. This was the one that sort of opened the door to generative AI for the general public. I think they went from like no users in November 1st of 2022 to like 1 million users by the end of the month, and then they topped 1 billion users by February, if I'm remembering the statistics correctly. It's the fastest adoption of an application in history, I believe. So it is definitely worth checking out. And I'm going to actually back out of the presentation right now so that I can show you that. All right, can you still see my screen? I think I shared. Okay. So
Yeah, we can see it.
just to give you a little taste. So here, it's, as I said, it's a prompt-based system, right? You input some text and you get an output. Okay. And it runs it through all these models in order to, and basically it's sort of predicting what word should come next based on the large database it's trained on. So it's stringing together words following an algorithm, but it doesn't, people say, well, does it understand? I wouldn't say it understands what it's saying. I'd say it's using probability to put together words that make sense together, right? But that's why I encourage us to kind of work with it rather than let it do your work, because you do need to go in sometimes and edit stuff, depending on the kind of prompt a lot of times. So here's my prompt: create a lesson plan for a college course on generative AI. So just to give you a little taste of what this can do. Boom. And in about 10 seconds, I'm going to have something that at the very least I could use to brainstorm, right? Maybe I don't want to use this verbatim, but it's giving me ideas for, what to do, what topics to cover each week, even a textbook, although I fear that's probably invented. So you definitely want to go check out any kind of statistics or facts or sources that it gives you, you probably want to go and make sure that it's actually a real source and it's not being hallucinated. Is it lying? No, I don't think it's lying. I think it's more like eager to please. And so it's giving you something that sounds right. But here, that was it. And what it spit that out in less than 10 seconds. Okay. I could ask it for activities, assignments, assessments, and it'll create stuff. And again, I see this as an excellent tool to brainstorm with and on some types of projects to co-create with. Okay. The next tool I want to show you is called Tome. And Tome is has a different kind of output. Tome actually helps you generate presentations. And again, you know, would I use the presentation flat out? Probably not, but it would give me an idea of a kind of presentation I could use. Okay. So similar question, create a presentation for a college course on generative AI. So now it's going to generate an outline. Oh, I'm running out of credits. No, did not anticipate that. All right. So it's going to show me an outline. It's got some different title options. I like the first one, Generative AI Unleashing the Power of Artificial Creativity. Let's generate the presentation. And you see where they're trying to sell the upgrade, that it's going to be faster, whatnot, you know. By the way, there is a paid version of ChatGPT, which is supposed to be much better than the free one, ChatGPT 4.0. And one of the things that they promise is that you know, it'll be faster, the model is better that it uses, and you won't have as many delays and outages. Sometimes when you try to log into ChatGPT, because there's so many people using it, sometimes you kind of have to be on hold. Okay, so this is a presentation that AI just churned out on what is generative AI. So let me go to the first slide here. You know, I think it's pretty nifty for something where I did almost nothing, right? And I could just deliver this presentation. So pretty cool. Some nice images. And AI can generate these images. I don't know if you've ever played around with some of the image generators out there. Dolly, of course, everybody knows that one. I'm blanking on some of the other ones out there. And then there are a bunch of video generators. Say again?
Midjourney.
Midjourney, that's the one. Midjourney. And you can also do some video generation with Runway, and Sora is the one that I just saw. Although I think that one's in beta. I'm not sure if everyone can access that. But that's through OpenAI.
It is in beta, but you should absolutely, if you haven't at some point, go check out the
Okay.
muted myself again. Go check out the videos that OpenAI has under Sora. They are extremely impressive.
I will definitely go check that out. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to hop back in here, and now we're going to start some discussion questions here. Let me go to slideshow mode. Boom. All right, and if you want, you can enter your questions in the chat, or you can just unmute yourself and ask a question.
Hey, Frank, there was a question in the chat Megan answered, but it was about hallucination. So
Okay.
if you want to maybe expound a little bit about what does it mean when you say that the AI hallucinates? Why does it happen? That might be helpful.
I'm not sure why it happens. Again, I'm not a computer scientist, but I can explain what it is. Essentially, it creates a plausible answer or resource to a prompt that you ask, but that response might not be true. Like sometimes it'll invent, like if you asked it, you know, tell me the different types of penguins, it might invent a few, right? Or, you know, give me some articles about, you know, latest advances in cancer research. It might create, some of them might be real and some of them might be fake. Like, is it lying? Is it a compulsive liar? No. It's just that because it doesn't really understand what it's saying, it's using these probability models. This is my understanding. It's putting together something that sounds plausible. Does that answer? And feel free to jump in, team, if you want to throw
So
in here.
for a great example, I think, is if you have a student, and we can get into some student use applications and what that looks like later, so I don't want to open that can of worms. But let's say you have a student who is asking for help with some sources and some writing of a research paper, and they say, you know, make sure to put citations in there in MLA format because I know my teacher is going to need that, and put it with a works cited. And it will give them the little paragraph and have MLA citations in there and then have the works cited at the bottom. But if you, the teacher, went to go look for that citation, you're like, oh, I haven't heard of that article. It says that there's an article by Meredith King about hallucination in AI. That sounds really interesting. Let me go find it. And you would search for that article and you wouldn't find it. And what you might find is other articles that I have written about AI. So what it did is when it scraped all that data and pulled in that data set, it put together in its modeling, this is a person who writes about AI. Here are types of article names. These are probabilities that would be put together based on something that seems logical. So it's not so outrageous. It's not like, oh, here's an article about AI by Leonardo DiCaprio, where you'd be like, that's so silly and ridiculous. It just seems maybe close enough that sometimes it's hard to understand where that information is real or not real, which is why I think the name hallucination is so great for that.
Yeah.
There's
So
another
we have a question
question.
yeah.
About tools. A tool to help grade student videos or recordings. Frank, have you come across any of that?
A tool to help grade student videos and recordings. That's interesting. I'm not sure. I haven't had occasion to test that. Now, if you can pull the transcript from the video, then you can submit that to any of these chatbots and they can evaluate it. As far as inputting video, I would try Runway and Midjourney and see if they can do anything with video as far as evaluating it. And I see a comment from Chris Kilgore. I guess the term hallucination bugs me a little. It makes it sound like the inaccurate information just happens, whereas the system is designed to produce logical say things about it. It doesn't understand. Okay. Yeah. You know, it's funny. You know, I think we have to remember that at least the ones we're looking at here, they're chat bots. They like to chat. I kind of remind myself, it will talk. It will tell you things because you're asking it questions. Those things that it tells you may not be accurate. And there's also the issue of bias in how they're trained, which will come up in a later section. So what other tools have you used out there? Let us know what tools you've used.
Frank, let me jump in. Somebody also asked about the AI detection tools, and I want to sort of like address that briefly. I did in the chat, but also the particular commenter said, my AI detection tool and Turnitin disappeared. Yes, it was one of many AI detectors, but they're out on the market it was rolled out and then it was rolled right back in because they are not effective. They're simply not effective. I don't know if they'll ever be effective. They are experiencing some of the same issues with AI detection that resources like Turnitin experience. Once a piece of a student's work is in Turnitin, it's a part of its database, which means that if the student submits that same resource again for review, it's probably going to pop positive as plagiarism because it's in that database. The Turnitin database doesn't necessarily make the distinction between, well, this was draft 1 and this is draft 2. That doesn't make it plagiarism. But the same thing with the AI detectors. People were experimenting with them and dropping content straight into these AI detectors that was definitively created by AI tools and was like, nope, this isn't AI. This is totally not AI. And they're like, okay, yes, but it is. And I know that it definitively is. So it's a thing. And I'm not sure that I would trust AI detectors. But admittedly, I am coming at this topic from a sort of intellectual property perspective that makes that sort of thing problematic anyway.
Thank you, Megan, for that response. I also wanted to jump in here because we had a Turnitin outage too of the AI detector. And what we found out when we contacted our rep was this. When AI came out last year, or November, but coming into 2023, all of these plagiarism companies rushed to get out some kind of AI detection tool, Turnitin being one of them, right? They rushed something out and they gave it away. Essentially, it was a beta, and they gave it away for free. However, because nobody had contracted to have this tool, they just added it. However, at the end of our contract period, turns out we had to now pay extra for this tool. So for a while, we lost it too, until, we ponied up the money to have the AI detector turn back on. So it didn't go away. They didn't take it back because it wasn't working. That's another question. I do agree with Megan. They don't really work. They turned it, it was sort of like you know, I hate to, well, I'm not going to make the comparison, but they kind of get you hooked, and then now you got to pay for it, right? And that's what happened. And our faculty, even though we told our faculty don't rely on these detectors because they're not accurate, I think it's a kind of a security blanket to have a tool that they can use, and they can point to this score and say, oh, this may be AI generated material, right? The problem is, of course, there's nothing behind that but an algorithm. And there have been some really good, investigations of how those algorithms work and why you can't trust them. There was an article in the news, I think it was New York Times recently, called something like "Why AI Thinks the Constitution Was Written by AI." And essentially, and that was true. And essentially, the reason is because, AI is trained on, resources across the internet, right? Samples of good writing. And the Constitution has been so important and so impactful on student writing because, we teach sort of 18th century writing skills in English courses. We have a lot of 18th century samples that any student that is trying to emulate that style of writing or that rhetoric, AI will assume is AI because AI is emulating that style of that rhetoric. So this was one of the things brought up in the article. And one of the reasons why you can't trust that the detector will be able to accurately identify whether a student has plagiarized with AI or not. Turnitin, I actually like what they're doing because they have a whole website with resources and tips on how to use their AI detection tool. They flat out say the number is not conclusive, right? You can't just say, haha, caught you. Here's the number, 99% faked. You can't do that. Instead, they say the number is a starting point for a conversation. And we've all been there with students, and then you have them like discuss what they wrote and, prove that they actually understood it and they did it themselves, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The other issue is, and we've tested this with my team, they have AI spoofing tools. So you can run something, you can have ChatGPT write a paper for you, and then you can take that paper and run it through another application that spoofs it and makes it essentially AI detection proof, right? So if you took what came out of ChatGPT, run it through Turnitin, it would be 100%. But if you took what came out of ChatGPT, ran it through this other tool, and then ran it through Turnitin, all of a sudden it says 10%. So, and that's because they know the algorithms that Turnitin AI is using. So just be aware that these, if someone's going to cheat, they're going to cheat. It's been around since the beginning of educational history. And so, I would always tell people is, look at your assessments, make it harder for the students to cheat by redesigning your assessments. And also, and I really love this idea I found, I can't remember whose website it was, but if AI can perform that work, then that's probably not what we should be focusing on teaching our students, right? Because at some point, No one's going to pay a person to do what AI can do. And so that kind of stuck with me, you know, that our assessments should be AI proof. They should be things that AI can't do just flat out, right? In 30 seconds or 5 seconds, what I just showed you. Okay, I want to move us on because we have some more sections to go through here, and I'm already running behind. I've been blah, blah, blah in my mouth here. So let's move on to the next section. And if you have questions, we'll come back to them later on. Academic integrity in AI. Go on, Megan.
Can you give me the next slide? As a frame of reference for what I'm going to discuss here, I am a former reference and instructional librarian, and amongst my responsibilities there was to teach students and faculty about copyright, fair use, and Creative Commons licensing. But this is also in conjunction with explaining to students and to faculty that plagiarism is complicated, what it looks like, and how to avoid it. I tried to ensure that my classroom colleagues did not always think of their students as morally bankrupt when it came to plagiarism, that it was often more about performance insecurity and ignorance around what plagiarism is. That is something that we need to bear in mind going into conversations around academic integrity and artificial intelligence. The current crop of students particularly are focused on providing what they perceive as the right answer, rather than focusing on the process and what we want them to learn in that process, and that the right answer is not really what we're looking for. We're looking to see how they get to any answer that they get to. So bear in mind that your students may not be using AI because they're just slacking. They may be using AI because they want to perform well and they think that this particular kind of tool can help. And it can help them perform well, especially if writing is not their strong suit. But it's also important to remember that AI is not causing students to cheat. There are a multitude of factors that enable students to cheat. It's not just because the resources are there that they could use, like AI, but also Google, but also paper mills and that sort of thing. But they're doing these things for multiple reasons. AI literacy, which is in its infancy, right alongside artificial intelligence, will need to address academic integrity, but it will need to do so with the idea that academic integrity can be highly contextual. Because of the work of Meredith and Elizabeth, particularly around the disciplines of communication, I have come up with the phrase, one man's plagiarism is another man's innovation. And so we need to understand that what might qualify as plagiarism in one particular discipline, one particular department, would not be regarded the same way. So we cannot always say any use of AI is plagiarism, any use of AI is academic dishonesty. We need to understand within our courses or within our disciplines that may be the case. And it's interesting that we went into the discussion of AI detection tools. So I'm not going to dwell on that here since I feel like we covered it pretty well in the previous discussion. But I do want to emphasize this point, and I know that my colleagues are tired of hearing me say this, but it is something I'm going to say until I am blue in the face. I say it to my classroom colleagues. I say it to anybody who will listen to me talk about this stuff. Academic integrity is what is important here, and our values around the value of academic integrity, how important it is to us as academics, how important it is to us as educators, will not change. And it should not change. We need to be communicating to our students now, whether we're talking about artificial intelligence or not, why academic integrity is important, that it's just one facet of developing integrity as a professional, but it is also a way in which we protect our intellectual property. And that's something that can be generated in a variety of ways, not all of which can be replicated by artificial intelligence. So we need to remember, academic integrity is important. AI doesn't have to change that. It is something that we need to communicate, and it's something that we need to talk about. The literature is full of conversations around how AI is affecting academic integrity. There is not as much information around why our students plagiarize and cheat and how we can combat that in meaningful, efficient, effective, and compassionate ways. That is a conversation we also need to have. We also, as faculty, need to be transparent around our expectations regarding the use of AI in our classes, regarding the use of AI on our assignments, and we need to be engaging in these conversations with our students. because we are in many cases at this point in time, the first contact that our students are having with artificial intelligence in the context of coursework and in the context of academic integrity. And I know what y'all are thinking, but Megan, we're all still learning artificial intelligence literacy. And this is very, very true. But that is why I think it's important for us to be as transparent as we can about our own use of AI, our own feelings of AI, and be willing to engage in these conversations with our students. This is how we teach them meaningfully about our values and our principles as professionals. You need to articulate this in your policies. And if you're looking for a good statement, I'm going to hype my friend Meredith King down here. She has got a wonderful, very broad policy statement, a syllabus statement that can be used that is wonderful. It creates a space for innovation. It creates a space for experimentation, but it also creates a space for accountability, and that's important as well. I don't know where UTK is on policy writing yet. My own institution, we're about to wrap on our academic integrity and artificial intelligence policy, but it has opened up some really good conversations with my colleagues. And so again, it may seem overwhelming, but I think it's important to look at these as opportunity rather than, barriers in the way. These are really great places to have conversations. Yes, somebody asked if Meredith could share that text. She has dropped it in the chat. Let's move on to the next slide, Frank. Because I have a lot of thoughts around this. I have been marinating in this for a long time, and I know that many of y'all are classroom faculty, and so you probably have a lot of questions around this. Here are our conversation starters here. But bring on what you've got. Bring on your questions. Let's have a conversation together as colleagues. I got lost in the sauce of the chat while I was back. Sorry.
I mean, it might be helpful just to extend to maybe say a little bit more. I mean, we kind of talked about the plagiarism checkers, but what you've seen in the past year around how institutions are handling cheating and plagiarism. I mean, I talked to y'all about the viral girl on TikTok who spent her whole winter break fighting her institution because they said she plagiarized, but she actually used Grammarly. She even got Grammarly involved and got them to write a statement and showing back and forth. And so it was like a whole big deal on TikTok. People were deeply invested in her story because she got, written up for violating the academic integrity policy when she was like, I wrote my paper. So maybe you can speak to that a little bit.
Well, I'm afraid we're going to run out of time for the next section, which is ethics, and that's your section. And I want to make sure that people hear about this, because when I started trying to do research on ethics of AI in higher ed, everything was academic integrity. And I think there are other things that we need to address as well moving forward. Our contact information will be available to y'all, so feel free to reach out to us to address any of your other questions around these topics. I would be glad, but with the caveat and emptor statement that if you ask me things, I will talk to you. So moving on to the next section, which is Dr. Hornsby.
Yeah, so I'm going to just talk briefly about some ethical implications of AI. That could be a whole hour. And then actually I'm going to turn it to Meredith so she can talk, and then hopefully we'll have a couple minutes to ask questions at the end. But I really want y'all to hear from Meredith because it sort of pulls all of this together. In terms of the ethical implications of AI, they go beyond academic integrity. The thing that's complicated about nailing down the ethics of this situation is that the technology is not static. It's not stable. At every iteration, it is changing. It is updating. It is getting smarter in some ways, and it's getting not smarter in some ways. So nailing down what that means in terms of ethics as we apply them in an academic setting gets really, really tricky, especially because there are so many use cases of these technologies across the institution. We're not just talking about students going to use it to complete their assignments. We're talking about it being embedded in the tools that we use every day, right? So Microsoft has said Copilot now has an educational license. What happens when it's in all of our sort of work productivity tools? How do you I don't want to say police, but how do you understand and establish guardrails on something that is becoming so ubiquitous in ways that we don't fully understand? I mean, it's going into your learning management systems, it's going into your financial aid software because there's money to be made. So how do you parse through the ethics of all that as it is sort of seeping into our way of working, way of learning, way of knowing, and way of disseminating knowledge? One of the things that we've talked about ad nauseum is that you really have to consider the effects of on bias, equity, confidentiality, and privacy. We talked about earlier, all these models are trained on data sets. A lot of times there's not a whole lot of transparency as to where this data is coming from, how it's being used. Why do you get hallucinations or confabulations or whatever you want to call it? It's because that data is sometimes inaccurate, incomplete, and it is not advantageous to the owners of that data to be transparent about that data. And so there are all kinds of concerns around accessibility. We had a whole conversation in the chat around neurodivergence and all of that. So there's a lot that has to be understood, but it's difficult when the target keeps moving. It reminds me, and I'll end with this before I go on to literacy because that moves into Meredith's thing. It reminds me of early conversations around the internet and then early conversations around social media, right? We didn't fully understand the impact of these sort of foundational disruptive technologies. So there were policies and guidelines. If you go back and look at early internet adoption policies, if you go back and look at early social media policies, they were we would call them very archaic. We would say that they were restrictive in ways we didn't understand, but they were also very open. Fast forward to now, we're having conversations about misinformation and disinformation and mental health and digital use and social media, all these things that sort of evolved as the technology evolved, as it became more ingrained in our daily life. Then we started realizing, oh, wait, these are things that we should probably think about as we are not only using them in our personal lives, but also using them in our classrooms, in our academic spaces. AI is operating in the same way. The problem is that because tech disruptors have learned that to move fast and break things, right? They're moving and we're not moving with them. And so this conversation around ethics becomes even more important, but often what gets lost is that we've already sort of we can recognize that there are ethical implications of technology writ large that can be applied to AI. And so we have literacies around information literacy, media literacy, digital literacy. We don't have to throw all of those literacies out. We have to just think strategically and intentionally about how those literacies can be mapped onto this artificial AI space. And that will help give us guardrails as the technology is changing to be true to our ethical stance so that we can question the technology in a way that says, yes, it's available, but should I use it? Yes, I have this information, but should I put it in? You absolutely should not be putting your students' assignments into any sort of open AI system. It violates FERPA. And further, you could be inadvertently helping train that data in an erroneous way, especially if it's like a draft or something. I mean, so there are some things that we know that should be applied to this that maybe if we take a pause, which I'm not because I'm talking fast because I'm about to turn it to Meredith, but take a pause and say, okay, what do we know in terms of ethics and how we operate in our classroom and what we know about technology in our classrooms and utilize it in that way? And I think those are the conversations, if we start to have now, will help us as the technology is ever shifting and evolving. So I'm going to turn it over to Meredith. Frank, you can skip my discussion slide and maybe we can come back to it if we have a few minutes, but I want Meredith to get to the future of learning.
Okay. Elizabeth teed me up for this so hard. I see where she was going with this, and I appreciate it. So just some thoughts about some of the benefits. And I've been seeing in the chat some people discussing what the benefits are. And I love that that's where this conversation is going, because I feel like oftentimes when we have these discussions, we are sort of pulling teeth on that. And I feel like that's not the vibe today. And I love that. So I'll go over this very, very quickly, and I speak quickly, so we'll go. So just imagine a world, right, where you have a big, big class and students each have individualized and personalized tasks and attention. I saw a lot of discussion in the chat about what this can do for students who have learning disabilities, students who are neurodiverse. That's exactly the type of stuff that we can be using this technology for. Our students will need to know how to use AI for their future of work. We need to be the ones who teach them. Somebody is going to teach them, and universities need to make it their jobs that this is where they are going. I think we all understand that universities are at a particular crossroads right now, and that we need to keep finding ways to make ourselves vital. So we need to do that. And then also in considering the increase in productivity for your own work in teaching or in administration, in any of those things. An example that I see used a lot that is more polarizing than I thought it would be is writing reference letters. I thought this would be like the best example ever, where you can input a few things that you remember about the student or the student has told you as a highlight, and then like the recommendation just writes itself and you can change a few things, and you're not spending forever writing 400 billion recommendations that are essentially the same that you're trying to come up with little tweaks for. I've used it for things like that. It is amazing. It's so helpful. So we have someone in the chat saying that they used it to write letters because, you know, or was happy to write letters but hated the process. And that's exactly it, right? You're happy to do the thing. The process is difficult because the getting to that end product is difficult. So Frank, if you want to go to the next slide. So what we've come up with is this larger idea of how we need to think about this, especially when it comes to changing how we think about education and what it is that we are doing foundationally. I saw some conversation in the chat where I was trying to keep track of it and it keeps moving, but where someone very, very cleverly said that, it looks like Mark said, we should consider the ways to adapt some of our assignments and assessment, ways to think to embrace AI and rethink our teaching assessment approaches. And to me, that goes beyond just changing lessons. It goes to understanding what it is that we need to be teaching in light of AI. And that brought me to this idea of cognacy. What cognacy is the foundational ability to think and understand in a process that decouples cognitive processes from their tangible outcomes. My quick example that I use for this all the time is at some future, and we're not quite there yet, but at some future, my friend who is a brilliant artist will be able to draw a horse. And I'll say, draw a horse, and they'll draw a horse, and it will be the most beautiful horse. And I can't draw worth a damn. It is bad when I try, but I'm very good at prompting. And at some point in our future, I will be able to prompt an AI to get my drawing of a horse to the same digital drawing of a horse that they have done. What is the difference in product there? If we take those in and they are indistinguishable, what is the difference in product? The difference there is in process. And we need to be able to judge process as separate from product in a way that allows us to understand that what we are looking at as those cognitive abilities, those critical thinking skills, and how all of that is foundational. We can think about cognacy like we would think about literacy or the push towards numeracy. We want people to understand the big idea as the umbrella and then be able to come into it and figure out what tasks fall under that. Because when you understand the umbrella ideas, then you can do anything. So look for more on cognacy. This is our big thought. This is what we've been working on, and how we're sort of framing these discussions as we get to them. The other things that I like to speak to, which sort of also are cognacy skills and come under this, I'll start with the third one because it really ties into that. Teaching to love the edit is part of that, right? What is the process? What is the prompt engineering? How do you go back and edit those pieces? How do you see stuff that comes out of any generative AI as something that is editable and not a singular monolithic piece that you just turn in? What can you be doing for yourself and for your students to understand that everything is a back and forth process? None of us have ever written anything that was perfect and didn't need edits, and neither does generative AI. And the more that we can teach our students process, the more that we're going to show them how to co-think, co-create, co-work with AI for their future. The final thing is, what is the human element? I put this as be the tortoise, not the hare. AI is very good at doing things fast. As you saw with Frank's demonstration, we had that lesson plan like that. We had that presentation like that. And again, part of that rethinking those cognacy skills, that process, that learning to love the edit, is understanding what the human element is. As quickly as I'm talking right now, I am able to sit back and think about things. I can take this discussion that we've had today, process it, think about it, come back, have a side discussion, think about it with someone else, and really come to a clear conclusion based on a lot of research and time to understand what that looks like. You can prompt AI to continue to have all those pieces, but it's never going to have that human element of that whole look, or at least when I say never, the weak AI that we're at right now is not. Who knows what that future looks like? But for now, what we are doing, the human element that we can bring to that is, again, cognicy, that big space, that overall umbrella thought, and that space to be slow. Work wants students to be fast. Academia wants us to be slow. Let's take that time. Let's take that time to think and process and be in that space and allow our students to learn to do that so they can bring those skills to the future of work. Okay, we can go to the next slide, but really we can go to open questions because we have like 2 seconds left.
Okay, well, I'm going to
those
leave.
are just some things.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm going to leave these questions up here, but really it's open to whatever questions you have. And if you want to put it in the chat, we can go from there and the team can jump in as needed here organically.
And I put it in the chat. I did want to plug that both Meredith and Megan will have all of these ideas in written form coming out soon for a special edition in the journal I linked. I'm the guest editor for, so I know it's coming soon. So if you want to hear more about cognizy, if you want to hear more about Megan's thoughts on AI and academic integrity and all the things that she said, there's some really great work that's coming out soon, and it will be at that website. So I encourage you to bookmark that link.
And we are always available. I'm putting my email in the chat. I encourage others to go ahead and do the same. We're always available for further conversations about this. We love talking about this. I promise you, we meet with each other sometimes twice a week on Zoom to talk about this in various forms. We are very, very into it. You will never bother us in any kind of a way when you come talk to me and you say, Meredith, tell me more about cognizy. Tell me more about the future of thought and learning. Megan, tell me more about plagiarism detection. Elizabeth, tell me more about ethics. We are here for it. So please, we invite you to contact us to come be in this continuing discussion with us.
All right, and to the person,
yeah,
and the person who said the Iron Giant, there's the Iron Giant. And to me, this is a positive image of humanity working in concert with AI, right? I think that's the future. It was John Oliver, the comedian, who said, the concern for the future is not that AI will replace humans, but that people who know how to use AI will replace those who don't, right? And I think that gets to that point in the comments about designing our assessments to take advantage of AI, right? To have students using AI to co-design, co-create, co-brainstorm, whatever, with AI and focusing on the cognitive skills rather than on the outcomes and the products. All right, I think that's it. That's a wrap. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Thanks to the team for being here today and co-presenting. Thanks to Igor for inviting us. I had fun.
Thank you.